Hi, everybody, and this is my third conversation on disentangling patriarchy, and I'm so excited to invite to speak with my friend Nina Menkes. And I'm going to read you a little bio about Nina, and so you know who she is. Okay. Considered a cinematic feminist pioneer and one of America's foremost independent filmmakers, Menkes has shown widely in major independent film festivals, including Sundance, many times, Berlin, Cannes, the New York Film Festival, the La Cinematheque Francaise, British Film Institute, the Whitney Museum of American Art. She has had numerous retrospectives worldwide, including this year at BAM in New York and at the American Cinematheque in Los Angeles. Menkes' honors include a Los Angeles Film Critics Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, 2 fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, and an AFI Independent Filmmaker Award. This is my favorite line. She's called a cinematic sorceress, which is very cool, by the New York Times. Menkes' films synthesize inner dream worlds with brutal outer realities. With echoes of Chantal Akerman and David Lynch, Menkes' visually stunning and unflinching films have made their mark on modernist filmmakers of the last 2 decades. Her debut feature, Magdalena Varaga, endures as a brilliant portrayal of the inner life of an alienated sex worker as she battles the walls which surround her, both material and psychic. The film was awarded Best Independent Film of the Year by the Los Angeles Film Critics Association and was featured in the Whitney Museum of American Art Biennial. Her subsequent features cemented her reputation as a singular voice in American filmmaking whose work feels ahead of its time. Now, this year, in honor of 2023 Women's History Month, Menkes was honored with a full retrospective on MUBI, and she's described as a pioneer of feminist cinema, a visionary artist, and one of the great cinematic radicals of her time. Our time. It's all of our times. Great. Okay, now we're going to talk about her latest documentary, which is called Brainwashed. And in Brainwashed, Menkes explicitly addresses themes of female subjectivity and misogynistic violence, which she has been exploring in her narrative work for decades. It's described as accessible, engrossing, and urgent, and it takes viewers on an eye-opening journey through gender politics of shot design, drawing a through line from the male gaze to the Me Too movement, to gender discrimination in the film industry and the workplace at large. The film uses more than 175 film clips from Hollywood favorites and cult classics, as well as many interviews. Nina has taught for many years at Cal Arts, and she lectures regularly at universities and many places. So we're going to discuss Brainwashed, the film, but I had a question from yesterday, which I'm going to follow over with, which leads into Nina, which some people have asked me after my conversations the last 2 days, what is patriarchy? So I think we have to a little bit go back to that just to make sure we're all on the same level playing field. So I'm just going to read you a definition, which I actually got today from online. It was really fun how I got it. I'll tell you that later, but I did go to Chatbot because I wanted to try that. Really fun. Okay, and I actually got a good definition, which I'm just going to throw out there for now. Patriarchy is a social system in which men hold primary power and dominance in society, and women are often excluded from positions of power and influence. This can manifest in various ways, such as in the form of unequal pay, limited access to education and healthcare, restrictions on reproductive rights, gender-based violence, which we've discussed the last 2 days, and cultural norms that reinforce male dominance and female subordination. Patriarchy is deeply ingrained social construct that has been present in many, not all, many societies. And its effects can be felt today in many forms of inequality and discrimination. And the key part of this that I'm just going to repeat one time comes from Gerda Lerner from her book called The Creation of Patriarchy, which I'm just going to hold up if anyone hasn't read it. You can read this book. In this book, she makes a series of arguments about the origins of patriarchy. And she talks about it again as a system of oppression. And the key thing about this, and I'm going to read you this quote to keep this in mind as we talk to Nina. The system of patriarchy is a historic construct that has a beginning and it will have an end. it seems to have nearly run its course. So it's really key to understand that this is a social construct. It's a system of social structures in which men oppress and exploit women. So, which brings me, because I was thinking about that, and I was seeing sort of a lens, a political, economic, social, cultural lens through which we see society. And Nina's film does a really brilliant job of showing us the literal lens, the filmic lens, through which women are depicted, have been depicted for many years, in the beginning of cinema, I guess.
Yeah.
And how that affects how women are treated in the workplace and how women's lives are affected. So that's what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's such a long introduction, but it's important to say.
Yeah.
Well, so let's start at the beginning.
Yeah.
How did you make this film, and what was the talk you gave, and why did you just start to make this talk?
It's about a prostitute who hates her work, and there are a lot of sex scenes in the film. They're long, but you only see her face. You don't see her body. She never takes off her clothes. It was a very radical film for the time, and maybe still even today. And it won a Los Angeles Film Critics Award, which completely blew our minds.
Yeah.
It went to like 40 film festivals. It went to Toronto. It went all over the place. Went to the Whitney, and no one cared. No one wanted to give me money to make another film. You know, like they say, like you couldn't get arrested in Hollywood.
Really?
Yeah. Like, so, you know, that would never happen to a guy. Never. So as a way to basically pay my rent, because I had to pay my rent, I started teaching. So I never like aspired to be a teacher, really. I started teaching. And in the course of teaching, I realized that I couldn't just say like, I love this film, I hate this film, you know, which is how I used to talk. I had to say, be a little more specific and be like, well, why? It's sexist. Well, what do you mean? I think it's great. Look, the woman's so beautiful and she has all these lines. What are you talking about? You know, so through the process of teaching, I was like sort of forced to get more articulate about these things, you know, and I hadn't even read Laura Mulvey until relatively late in my, like after I made like 3 or 4 features. And then I was introduced to the writings of Laura Mulvey and other feminist film theorists. But because, you know, I don't teach film theory, I teach production. I was like, how do we take some of these ideas and then integrate it with my own knowledge about shooting, because I shoot all my own films. And that's how it came that I started, well, let me just show them these film clips. Right. Because the film clips are so, like, once you see it, it's like, oh my God. But most people don't notice, right? Right. So
do you want to talk about some of the ways that women are gendered and how that plays out? Yeah. What we are talking about is power dynamics that are very visual and that you can see in films. And this patriarchy, we're really talking about a power dynamic, about male power over women.
And this power dynamic is disguised under the veil of glamour. That is the way they seduce us into powerlessness. Being beautiful is called power for a woman. And that has a lot of major problems, you know, that we know, including the fact that, you know, at a certain age, you don't qualify as beautiful anymore, and et cetera, et cetera. But so what I break down in the film is that there are like 5 very specific.
You show it very well in the film. I mean, you use examples. So if you don't get this, please watch Brainwashed. It's available on Amazon.
On Amazon Prime, Apple, iTunes.
It's easy to watch, and she shows in very clear shots what she's going to explain now.
So I'll just do a short thing, and then you can watch the film and reach out after if you can always find me on the internet. So number 1 concept is that there's something called a visual grammar, which is a mirror of the grammar that we know in an English sentence. So you have, you know, the cat eats the mouse, the cat is the subject, the mouse is the object, the cat is acting on the mouse. The man sees the woman is the subject, he sees the woman is the object. That's an English sentence, grammatical. How do you translate that grammar of a sentence into a shot? Right. And so we break it down, you know, it's, if you see this shape, it means that the man is the subject, the woman is the object. If you see a full body as opposed to fragments, You know, there are all these different ways that break down in the film. Visual language, which disempowers women. And you see this, and in the film we have 175 examples from through history of A-list movies. We're not talking about the Roger Corman films.
Right.
They do it too, of course. We're not talking about Adam Sandler. We're talking about the gods of cinema.
Right.
Godard, Sofia Coppola, you know, Martin Scorsese, you know, yada, yada, yada. Like the one, Spike Lee. You know, these are people who everyone reveres.
And it's codified language in cinema. So people are unaware, really, I think, that what this language means. So they become tropes and they become utilized, and they're the way people are used to seeing women and men photographed in film. So, right? I mean,
it's so
invisible.
Normalized.
Yeah, it's normalized.
It becomes normalized so that you really don't notice it. And DPs, I've been approached after the screening of the film by, I was once approached even by a woman DP. I mean, this was incredible, who said, I didn't realize. I was just doing it. It's like, that's how you photograph women, right? It's like, this is how you do it. But what people don't realize is that by doing that, you are disempowering the women characters, even if they're the protagonist in the film. Even if, you know, because what we all know, Bechdel test, we all know, script, dialogue, character, we want the women to not always be a maid or a sexy babe. Maybe she can be a CEO. Maybe she can be the president of the United States, right? Or maybe she can't be. Not yet.
In this way, what is the unconscious language that we're
when you film that even the protagonist in this way, you are disempowering her because she's objectified. So this word objectified, I think it's really important. Can we talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I like to talk about it.
Okay, so we hear, you know, this is a phrase that most people are super familiar with.
Objective desire.
Yeah, oh, women are objectified. And we think of, you know, like a beer commercial or some woman lying on a car in a bikini. Okay, yeah, that's true. But what about the fact that what objectified means is it's versus subject. So full-on human subject. Men are allowed to be full-on human subjects. They're allowed to be sexual. They're allowed to be sexy. They're allowed to have desire. They're allowed to have sex and have a job and do all sorts of things all together, and it's all one thing under subject, right? But women are split off so that our sexuality is split off into this object position. And most women that I've talked to around the film, there's almost no women who cannot identify with this thing that when you're in the sexual situation, you sort of flip over into this object position. It's almost like you can't be yourself. You're seeing yourself from the other person's point of view, and you're like, you don't have autonomy. You're responding, or you're you know, this whole old story, women's desire is to be desired. That's all about this object story. Right. And that object position, which we're sold as glamour and beauty, is a disempowered position. That's
so we see this in films, and you make a very clear point of this triangle structure in your film of how this this affects women being employed in the film business, which you can explain is one of the most gender unequal job market places. That's first of all, and second of all, how it affects rape, culture, sexual violence. So can you explain both those links to how it affects women being employed in Hollywood,
right,
in front and behind the camera, which is true. I think you mentioned the percentage of women like who graduate film school, of which it's like 50%, but how many women actually go on to be directors in Hollywood? Very, very few.
Very few. It's coming out of film school, we have gender parity, and immediately it drops. It's gotten slightly better in the last literally handful of years. But the big budget films are still, I think it's like 8% women, maybe at best. And this is, I mean, I, you know, if we think back on film school, you know, there were a lot of talented women, there were a lot of talented men. All the talented men are, you know, living in Malibu with their Academy Award statues, you know, and the talented women are like barely struggling to maybe get a TV show generally. That's the situation. Or you're like me, which is you just go like, fuck that system, I'll make films on my own, outside the system, super low budget, you know, beg, borrow, steal. But anyway,
Or
I
you
lost
quit
it.
making films
Or you
too.
quit, most quit.
And that's part of it too.
Quit. Or most of the talented women who came out of film school, either they quit, they get, you know, completely different job, or they get a job in the so-called more supporting kind of professions, where they go into editing, they go into costume design, and the acceptable jobs for women. And it is starting to change a little bit, but I mean, the fact that it was big news that they came out this morning that the Cannes Film Festival has 6 women in competition. It's always been 3 or 2.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're still not at half, nowhere near, but it's
half.
big news.
There's 6.
There's 6, and I think it's out of 21. So they're so excited that they made it up to, you know, less than,
which
less
in
than
other fields, I mean, it just, well, politics is similar too.
Yeah.
But there is no gender parity. Let's be clear.
There's
Now,
none.
also this affects women's lives in direct ways, which is about contributing to what people consume and rape culture and sexual assault. Do you want to make that link too? Because you do make that link very clear. This is the media we all consume, and we all, I think Amy said this yesterday, it's like air, like none of us are aware of these systems. We don't consciously watch film and think, God, I'm really being, you know, I'm objectifying women as I watch this movie. We all watch the movie, we all enjoy Gilda, which is just something I'm thinking about. I guess she was Lady from Shanghai in your movie, but of course I enjoy looking at Rita Hayworth like that. We all do. But then, you know, but we also have to be conscious of what that means when we're looking at and we're consuming Rita Hayworth in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of us can identify, like one of the things about Brainwashed is that we really put in, I mean, there are a few exceptions of films that I really don't like, but a lot of the films are great films.
They're great films, yeah.
Metropolis, I love Metropolis, right? I mean, Vertigo, you know, Lady from Shanghai, these are great films.
They're great films, and let's be clear, we like these films. We do enjoy watching these films, but we're aware of the process by which we are watching them and how they're made.
And this split that happens to women, so women experience generally, I think it's rare for a woman not to experience this sort of split where you're, you know, you sort of have to almost shut off a part of your own brain to watch the film. But then at the same time, you're sort of like, you're identifying with that woman object, you're wishing that you're as beautiful as her, or you're tortured that you're not as beautiful as her, and you wish you were, and you're having all these other thoughts, which the male character is he's just having his life, you know? So anyway, so how does it tie into rape culture is that, you know, the objectification, I think it's really important to remember that objectification is not only used against women. The Nazis used objectification against the Jews. You know, before you murder, you know, a bunch of women and children and throw them in a pit, you can't really do that if you think these are human beings.
Exactly.
You have to go through a process, and the process is objectification.
Exactly. They're othered. They're othered and they're less than. And this also happens, you described this about in Race too in your film.
In Race, it's a scam.